Good afternoon. It's a real privilege and pleasure for me to be here today. What makes a city great? Have you ever thought about why it is that some cities seem to grow and prosper? Population increases, the economy grows stronger every year, the tax base expands, people want to be there. They're written in the magazines, ranked number 1 or number 5 in the nation. Then there is another group of cities that struggle. The population base is a little smaller each year, the tax base is a little smaller each year, and despite infusions of economic development, grants, and activity, the cities in that category just continue slipping a little bit each year. And then there's another group of cities that just never seem to change. Look at them 20 years ago, they look pretty much like they do today, and 20 years from now, they'll look pretty much like they do today. They just don't change. Well, what about Toledo? What about Toledo? Which group of cities do we want to be in? Do we want to be in, and do we envision ourselves being in that first group of cities that grows stronger each year, the tax base expands, economic development is a success, people want to be here, there's direct investment, foreign direct investment and domestic investment? Or will we be among the cities that struggle? We can just look to the north 40 miles to see what that's like. Or will we be pretty much the same? What is our vision? What happens in Toledo will be in large part dependent upon our vision for the future of Toledo. Do we have a vision for our city? Do you have a vision for Toledo? I'd like to just pause for a few moments and ask you to think about this for a little bit. Let's imagine that the year is 2025. That's just 12 short years from now, and we will be a quarter of the way through the 21st century. It's unbelievable. But think about 2025 and where Toledo is going to be, how you envision Toledo. Do you see Toledo as being among those successful cities like Portland and Indianapolis and Charlotte and Austin, Lexington, Kentucky, cities on the move? Or do you see Toledo in that second category of cities struggling and not quite making it, losing population? Or will we be pretty much the same? I wish we had the time to just take a poll today. I'd like to just have every one of you tell me what your vision for the future of Toledo is. It would be instructive and it'd be interesting where you see us 12 years from now. But we don't have time for that. But I would like to remind all of us, including myself, of the power of a self-fulfilling prophecy. What we believe and what we envision in the future will govern our behavior. If we believe something that's going to happen in a certain way, we will behave that way. If we envision the city of Toledo going in a certain direction, we will collectively act that way and respond that way. So our own actions can have a significant impact on the future of our city. You know, Toledo has had an interesting history of visionaries, inspiring visionaries in some cases. If you go back to the late 1800s, we had a person here by the name of Jessup Scott. It's a name well known to Toledoans. We've named a high school after him, and the University of Toledo named one of its campuses, the Scott Park campus, after Jessup Scott. In 1868, I believe it was, Jessup Scott wrote a wonderful and inspiring essay, Toledo, Future Great City of the World. Jessup Scott was something of a geographic determinist, and he was looking at the trends, and he saw the location of Toledo on the Maumee River in Lake Erie. He also saw the westward movement with people moving out to the west and Toledo being right in the pathway. And because of its location and because of the demographics of the country at that time, he believed strongly that Toledo was destined to become one of the great cities of the United States and in fact one of the great cities in the world, largely because of our location. Then we've had some other visionaries that have had thoughts about the future and have worked for it. In the mid-1940s, for example, publisher Paul Block commissioned a major study on the future of Toledo and created an actual vision of what Toledo might look like 50 years in the future. That was done by a well-known urban planner, Norman Bell Geddes, Geddes. And then later in the 1980s, we had our own version of the Jim Roush plan in downtown Toledo. Jim Roush, of course, was thinking that he could save the downtowns of America, and we bought into that. What is the future? What is our vision for the future? I can tell you this, that Toledo is ripe for a vision for the future. Where will those visionaries come from? The ones that we've been talking about came from the 19th century and the 20th century. What we need now is a vision for the 21st century for Toledo. Where is that going to come from? It might come from students that are here today, from one of our high school students, might come from some university students, some entrepreneurs, or a group of entrepreneurs who are innovative and creative. But I strongly believe that the new vision for Toledo, the vision for the 21st century, must be a collective vision. We've heard that phrase here already this morning. Is absolutely correct. What we need is a collective vision, one that we as a community can buy into and embrace. What is that future vision going to be? When you take a look at all of the assets, and we've talked a lot about those assets already today, and I'm a little reluctant to go through some of them, but I will do it again to mention just a few. One category of assets that really stands out for us, I think, are the transportation assets. These were assets that Jessup Scott recognized back in the 1860s. Think about it. Just a few hundred feet from where I'm standing now, we have a seaport that connects literally to every seaport in the world. 20 minutes to the west, we have an underused airport. And unlike Chicago and LA and New York and Newark, we have open skies, an uncongested airspace. What an asset that is. And then we all know that the interstate highway system plays a big role in our city. We actually have the intersection of the major thoroughfares on the interstate system that cross right here in Toledo. I-75 running north and south, I-80-90 going east and west, and they literally cross in the city of Toledo. What an asset that is from the standpoint of logistics and transportation and warehousing. And then, of course, we're connected to the nation's rail system, an easy connect for us, and the Canadian rail system. We are literally, as we've heard many, many times, we're within 1 day's drive of 60% of the U.S. population, and the same is true in Canada. Those are just our transportation assets. We have all the modalities here to create a major transportation hub, intermodal hub for this country and all of North America, right here. We have the assets now. In addition, there's a long list of other assets, and you have your own list of the qualities you like most about Toledo. I have mine. But when you're thinking about the future and the vision of our city, remember some of these. We have a magnificent manufacturing history here with a manufacturing infrastructure and a manufacturing workforce with a strong work ethic that's been inherited from our parents and our grandparents. That's a huge factor for Toledo. And then the Toledo Museum of Art, the jewel in the crown. You hear about that museum all over the world, and it's nationally ranked. It's right here, a mile or so from where we are sitting today. And then I'd like to think the University of Toledo is a major asset for our community and region. Following the merger, University of Toledo emerged as the third largest university in the state of Ohio, and we joined the ranks of the top 20 universities in the nation with respect to the number of professional colleges and schools that we have. Think of that. It's a fantastic asset. And beyond the University of Toledo, we have in our region alone over 30 institutions of higher education. This region is rich in higher education assets, unlike most other places in the nation. And then we can continue on down the list. We have wonderful healthcare systems here, and they've been represented today. We have the metro parks and the zoo and the sports venues. All of them are world class, literally, in our own city. And I think no list would be complete, and the list can be quite long, but no list can be complete without recognizing the importance of where we sit on Lake Erie. We sit on the largest body of fresh water in the world. We have 20% of the world's fresh water literally at our doorstep, and we are on the banks of the Great Maumee River, the largest river that empties into the Great Lakes, flowing through the heart of our city. Think of that. Wow. I mean, when you start putting all of this together, what a fantastic array of assets that we have in our hands. And I would be remiss if I did not mention the most important of all of our assets, and that's the people of this community and this region. A friendly, non-pretentious, generous, diverse, hard-working population. It doesn't get any better than this. What more does it take to create that city of the world that Jessup Scott was talking about? How do we take what we have here and add them up so that they're more than the sum of their parts? We have many parts. We have many pieces. How do we put them together? We've used the phrase connecting the dots. We have the dots all spread out here. And with my list and your list, we have assets and qualities very few cities in this country or this world have, literally at our fingertips. How do we connect the dots? How do we put the pieces together to create that great city that Jessup Scott talked about? Well, there is an answer to that question, and the question is not too big for us. And I think we should embrace that question. But it's not too big for us to answer, and there is an answer. There is a strategy and there's a formula that cities across this country are now beginning to recognize and employ, and I've seen it in other places around the world. And that is connecting the dots, putting the pieces together to create a collective vision for our city. I just talked a little bit about that collective vision. But putting the pieces together, connecting those dots, and creating that collective vision is a collaborative process. And a collaborative process requires collaborative leadership. Let me say that again. This collaborative process of putting the pieces together and creating that vision requires collaborative leadership. Now, what do I mean by collaborative leadership? We've got great leaders in our community. They're leading their own organizations. But when I talk about collaborative leaders, I'm not talking about just being a great leader of your organization. I'm talking about leaders that are willing to put community in their formula. It's more than just calling your partner or another business or organization in communication. And it's more than just cooperating with other organizations for the greater good. And it's more than partnering, where the two organizations come close and they work together to create something. I'm talking about collaborative leadership, where they come together and co-labor to create a bigger vision, a bigger activity, a bigger city for us. I can think of a couple of examples just to illustrate this. In 1970, and maybe there are a few people in the room who might remember that year. I can see a few of them out here. In 1970, the Toledo Public Library, the Lucas County Public Library, and the Sylvania Library came together to form the Toledo Lucas County Public Library, 1970, 43 years ago. That library today, as a result of that merger, is nationally recognized as being one of the excellent libraries in our country. We have 18 branches of that library serving this region. Fantastic example. The other example, a little closer to home, and one that I remember well, and that's the 2006 merger of the University of Toledo and the Medical University of Ohio. These two institutions came together to create the third largest university in the state with all the programs I mentioned. And around this university, we've been able to strengthen the community in ways we weren't able to do that before. I think that merger not only strengthened the two institutions, but also strengthened our community, our region, and the state. So, where do we go from here? Collaborative leadership. We are the ones who select our leaders. And I think we're at a point in time where if we say to our leaders in all of our organizations, our schools, the public and private sector, we need to move forward and develop a more collaborative approach where we actually work together, giving up a little bit of authority, giving up a little responsibility, shedding some of your power for the greater good. When we are able to do that, I think we will be in a competitive mode with other cities who have recognized that. So, can we be one of those great cities in the future? I actually believe very strongly we can be. And I think we will be if we come together with a collective vision and collaborative leadership. Thanks very much.